there is such a thing as an ancient conspiracy theory, it's this.
Former fraud investigator Jimmy Corsetti, and now ancient site researcher.
You have the site of Göbekli Tepe, made up of sophisticated pillars, almost 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. We're talking about arguably the most mysterious ancient site because it's not supposed to exist. Earlier this summer, I'm like, let me revisit Göbekli Tepe and see what's new there. And I couldn't believe this. There's a gentleman who's an author and also leads tours, and he communicated with me that they're gonna defer a full-scale excavation for, quote, future generations. And I'm like, wait a second, are you serious? And so I started digging into this and I couldn't believe what I found.
What would be an alternative explanation?
So, okay. So Göbekli Tepe, brother, if there is such a thing as an ancient conspiracy theory, it's this. So I remember hearing Graham Hancock come on your show back in like 2015 or 2017, and he was talking about Göbekli Tepe. And at that time, he had shared that the site was only approximately 5% excavated. It's the first video on my channel. It's like August 2017, and I shared the details of it. These pillars dates back 11,600 years. It appears to be purposely buried at the same time of the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. This is fascinating. And you know, excavations were continuing. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna backburn this topic of Göbekli Tepe for a little while, let them further their excavations, and I'll revisit this later when there's something new to share. So earlier this summer, I'm like, all right, let me revisit Göbekli Tepe and see what's new there. And I was astonished to learn that 5% figure was still the same. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I've watched your videos on it. Your videos are undeniably strange. So here's some images where you could see what it kind of looks like along with this globalheritagefund.org story on it.
So
it shows 5%.
Right. And that figure is still the same as of 2023. Yeah. I had there's a lady who does tours there and corroborated the 5% figure. And then there's a gentleman named Hugh Newman, who's an author and also leads tours. And he communicated with me that what they were going to do, and I couldn't believe this, they're going to defer a full-scale excavation for, quote, future generations with a 150-year estimated time frame for a full excavation of Göbekli Tepe. And I'm like, wait a second. Are you serious? Like, this makes no sense. We're talking about arguably not just the world's oldest ancient site, but arguably the most mysterious, because it's like you were just saying, it's not supposed to exist. Based on everything we were taught in school, it's supposed to be the Sumerians. And then you have the site of Göbekli Tepe, made up of sophisticated pillars and concentric circles.
At least 5,000 years older.
Yeah, almost 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, and Stonehenge is a mystery of itself. Right. So I start Googling and looking into the details. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. How could they defer excavations for future generations when this may be the most important ancient site on Earth involving our mysterious lost ancient past? And so I started digging into this and I couldn't believe what I found. So they were doing large-scale excavations, but that has since ceased. Just to clarify, they are still excavating Göbekli Tepe, but they have rolled and dialed back the large-scale excavations of the years prior, and they are focusing on conservation and tourism management of the site. And like I said, with a 150-year time frame, and I'm like, wait a second. I can't, and I have all the screenshots in that folder.
Because of funding?
Absolutely not. So not only have they never claimed that it's related to funding, but this is where things get bizarre, is that there's a Turkish conglomerate called the Doges Group, which consists of 250 companies within Turkey. It's a billion-dollar industry, and they're the ones that took over management and funding of the site back in 2017, and they announced this at all places, the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. In 2016 is when they announced this partnership. Initial funding of $15 million. At that time, they set up the infrastructure for tourism. Roads, sidewalks, walkways, roofing platforms. And since then is when they dialed back the excavations. And I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. So let me just be crystal clear here. It has nothing to do with funding, and they've never claimed it has anything to do with funding. But their excuses, they have said, one of which is that, well, we want to wait for future technologies to develop so we can more safely excavate the site. And I'm like, wait a second, hold on a second. We're talking about pillars buried in dirt. It's 2024. Do not tell me that we do not have the technological capability to dig rocks up.
What would be an alternative explanation?
So okay. Them saying that they're waiting for a future technology to develop to safely excavate the site, I'm like, what type of magical shovel or pressure water hose are we talking about here?
Vacuum with dirt vacuum.
Right. And since they're saying they continue to excavate the site today, I'm like, well, which is it? Are you saying that you're doing so in unsafe methods? And I already know that's not the answer, because there's been no issue with destructing the site from digging it up. It's not like they broke a pillar and like, oh dang, wait a second, we need to walk this back. We're not doing things safely.
Right.
That's not the case here. So there are a few explanations here.
Okay, here's what I want to hear.
So one of which is that the most logical explanation, this is the less conspiratorial one, which is that it has to do with money. You have this Turkish conglomerate of people that are saturated with members of the World Economic Forum. For example, the CEO of the Doges Group is a longtime member of the World Economic Forum. That may backburn the World Economic Forum for a half a second. They're business people. They took over the site, and it's all about money now. Back in 2019, Göbekli Tepe had approximately 19,000 visitors yearly. Now it's at 500,000. Their focus, if nothing else, they're just trying to bring revenue in. It's all about money. Yeah, they don't care about excavating the rest of the site.
$15 more million, it's not going to bring $15 more million in revenue.
Right, and they just want their money back. Okay.
Right. Okay.
But I'm like, well,
that makes sense.
It does make sense.
To weigh in on that real quick, it also, the mystery plays, that site is probably the second most popular place on the planet with people like ourselves. And the more mystery is there, the more money, the more like, we deal in mystery. So if they excavate everything and we know everything there is about that site and it's all super mundane and there's nothing cool about it anymore, that tit dries up and there's no milk coming out.
Yeah, but how could it ever stop being cool?
I agree.
It doesn't make any sense.
I agree with that. But
that one doesn't make any sense.
That's a Zahi Hawass kind of thing. He's of the same opinion where I think a lot of the same things, happen in Egypt for the same reason. Zahi Hawass is quoted with saying that those New Age people, it doesn't matter what happens in Egypt, the New Age people, they come. It's about tourism. Ever since the Arab Spring, tourism in Egypt's been lower. So I think a lot of the same, we're going to talk in a minute about the hidden chamber in the pyramid that they've located and still haven't excavated for whatever fucking reason. I think that might be part of it. If you want to get super mundane and not conspiratorial, it's just a simple... The tourists keep coming while there's a mystery there. As soon as we open that up, it's just an empty chamber.
I don't buy that.
Me either.
The mystery of the structures themselves that we have completely excavated is just so fascinating.
So let me be clear on Göbekli Tepe. It's somewhere between 5 and 10% excavated. Which means that...
So it says some archaeological sites that where only 10% or less have been uncovered.
None of which date back anywhere near remotely as old as Göbekli Tepe. And so just to put this into perspective, Göbekli Tepe, according to ground penetrating radar, consists of approximately 200 T-shaped pillars. Only 72 of them have been unearthed. And as of just a few years ago, they're dialing that back to fully excavate them, which again, the 150-year time frame. And I'm like, this is entirely unacceptable. There could be hidden answers about our lost ancient past waiting to be discovered on these pillars, because all the pillars are trying to tell us some sort of story. They all have depictions, animals, all kinds of things on them.
There's the shaman with the bag.
Right.
Which is very interesting.
Right. We've seen that from the Sumerians. We've seen it in South America.
The bag thing is very fascinating.
It is. It's hotly debated.
I'm sure. You could say maybe it's a tool bag. You could say maybe it's psychedelics he's got in that bag.
Academics say it's just water.
Water.
It's a water bucket.
You guys familiar with the work of Martin Sweatman?
Excuse me?
You guys familiar with the work of Martin Sweatman?
Yeah.
No, I am not.
He's the one that he was on Ancient Apocalypse season 1 for a minute. He's the guy who's made basically a star map of that pillar 43, and in his opinion, those 3 handbags at the top were 3 sunrises. And if that's the case, that would almost make sense, because then like a picture of an Assyrian holding that would be like a holding of astronomical knowledge. Like this symbol could have been a symbol of knowledge of astronomy, which is one thing, honestly, about Göbekli Tepe.
Could have been a book bag.
It could have been a book bag.
Right? It kind of makes sense. They probably had to travel around with their books.
So here's the thing. That pillar, that's just one pillar out of 200. And here we are debating. We don't even know what it is. It's all conjecture.
Pull that up, Jamie, so we can see what that pillar looks like.
So this Göbekli Tepe situation is far more bizarre than we've described so far.
I think the logical explanation, though, is that you have massive tourist revenue coming to see it as is. Why spend more money and excavate these things?
I think that's
this is the pillar.
I think that's the most logical explanation, but it could be more insidious than that, because
So that's one pillar.
That's pillar 43, the most debated one of them all, and there's approximately 128 more pillars that are still buried in the earth.
What's that bird doing holding the earth?
Dr. Martin Sweatman, his first paper on Gobekli Tepe's pillar 43, he's got Scorpio in the bottom. He believes that's Sagittarius, that's the sun, and if that's one. Basically, it's a star map denoting the time that the comet smacked the earth. Is what he believes. Each one of those V's, his latest paper on it, each one of those V symbols is a day. In his opinion, each one of those boxes is a month. And there is basically a full year denoting the whole thing, the way he's broke it down. It's very interesting stuff. And one of the things that's wild to me, when we talk about like the lack of further excavations, is almost every pillar we bring up has new symbology, new symbols, new iconography. If we're trying to find some sort of ancient proto-language or something, we need more symbols. We need more things on Earth.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's completely opposed by the mainstream archaeology. The idea that these guys had any sort of written language is fucking ridiculous.
And what are the theories involved in, I know it's been theorized that it was purposely covered in dirt.
It really looks like it. If you look at pictures of the excavation, it looks like it was all piled in with stones and dirt, because if it was some sort of natural event, it would have destroyed the pillars. The pillars are preserved. So it wasn't just blown in with dust. If you look at it, it's gravel, and like as Graham Hancock has explained, that Klaus Schmidt, the original excavator of the site before his untimely passing in 2014, the people that have worked the site believe it was intentionally buried. That is debated in academia today.
But isn't there also carbon isotope dating of the ground soil that shows it's the same age throughout the entire whatever feet it is of the dirt that's covering it?
And so it's very apparent that it was purposely buried. And what's interesting about that is that it coincides exactly with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. So if you want an alternative idea
Could it be mudslides?
No, because it would destroy those pillars.
Knock them over at least.
Yeah. That I've seen that in Iraq with the statues. Right. So let's talk about this in a second. This is where things get wild. So that's
before the excavation. This is an aerial photo from what year is this?
That should be 2004. Or excuse me. That would be before 1994.
Yeah.
They started excavations in 1994, 1995.
So that is when it was just dirt.
Correct.
Everybody thought it was just a regular hillside, which makes you wonder how many more are there out there.
Well, they're finding dozens of other sites around Turkey that are
even
older.
Place.
And
even older.
Yes. So let me tell you a few different things about Göbekli Tepe. When you bring up pictures of the pillars, notice how they all annotate animals on them.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fun topic, and I have a few other things to share. One of which is that if you want to talk about reasons not to excavate it, I'll give you two possibilities. And this is just conjecture. I don't know what the answer is. Let me say this up front. But part of it could have a religious implication as well as a climate change implication. Let me start with that. So we know it is an established fact that the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe happened between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. We know that there was vast changes in weather patterns throughout the northern hemisphere. The only part of it that's debated, and as well as near extinction events or extinction events of many different mammals in North America, what we know is that something happened. Whatever it is what's debated, whether it's a cosmic impact, whether it's a pole shift, whether it's sun cycles, all kinds of conjecture all the way around. But when I mentioned the WEF, they are the biggest proponents of the man-made climate change narrative. They're the ones that want to get rid of gas-powered stoves. They want us to get rid of vehicles. They are pushing their initiatives around the world, and they believe that we're destroying the planet. I'm not saying they're entirely wrong, but I don't agree with their ways of going about it, but that's a side point. But here's the thing. When you look at the legend of Noah's flood and Noah's Ark and the flood, so I'm not suggesting that there was a flood that covered every mountain on Earth, and nor am I suggesting that there was a boat that housed every species of animal on Earth. However, if Noah's Ark existed, many believe that it was crashed onto Mount Ararat, which is also in Turkey. And something fascinating is that in the Bible, in Genesis 8:20, some of the first verses after Noah emerged from the flood, is that he was said to have constructed an altar to the Lord where he sacrificed some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird. Göbekli Tepe is in Turkey, and every single one of those pillars annotates animals. And some have suggested that it could be Noah's altar. Now, That could be one reason why they wouldn't want to excavate it, is because Turkey is an Islamic country, and if there was some Christian religious belief that was corroborated, they might not want that to happen. Another possibility is that the site itself might corroborate the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. And when we're in a time frame where they don't like talking, academics, they don't like talking about cataclysms. They want to pretend they didn't happen. They want everything to be man-made climate change.